Hi there. This is a quick audio-only bonus video I'm dashing off on the 4 out-of-universe reasons that the writers on House of the Dragon slightly changed the Blood and Cheese assassination. So these are out-of-universe, what you call Doylist reasons. Arthur Conan Doyle, writer, Sherlock Holmes. It's out-of-universe, why is that? 4 reasons. First, working with young child actors is very difficult. Second, TV-first audiences would have outright stopped watching in large numbers. 3, we'd have lost the very interesting character TV Helaena, who is different from the book character. And to an extent, 4, as a thematic thing, I think that they are spacing out the birth of Maelor in the TV series. They said he will be born later after this happened, but I can see the reasoning behind that. So for the rest of this, I'm just going to explain those 4 points. Now, Ryan Condal publicly addressed all of this. He didn't run and hide from, I made a change like Benioff and Weiss would. He gave multiple interviews where he gave substantial answers. They overlap a bit, but the big ones are Entertainment Weekly, an even better one in The Wrap, and those are text interviews. Then just like 2 days ago, he did a podcast interview with Westeros.org where he talked about it for a solid 10 to 15 minutes and different aspects of it, and that's best because it's in his own voice and unedited. So I'll link to the 3 of those below. Like Red Team Review already made a video going over the Wrap's version of this, Wrap.com, and how he agreed with okay, this is a reasonable change, that even if you disagree with it, he was polite about it. This isn't just changing stuff to change stuff. I can see why a rational person did this. So check those out, but the rest of this is me going over the 4 points very quickly. The first one, which is the most articulated, and I agree with just thinking on it, working with very young child actors would have been far too difficult. He said this in all 3 of them, and again, just linking it to make this shorter. If they were very small children, you couldn't get as much of a performance out of them. And you might argue, well, why not do what the TV show sort of did, where the children were asleep, have her choosing between 2 sons and then kill the other one. Think on that. A big part of what made it so traumatic in the book version is that Cheese outright taunts Maelor. Oh, she picked you to die, then they killed Jaehaerys, the older brother, just to be cruel. I mean, inherently a child actor would have to be awake to taunt him. So they couldn't do that, and at first I thought I didn't quite understand what Condal meant when he said, well, part of this is condensing the storyline in such a way that 30 years turned into 20 years. We didn't really have time to have Maelor. And I said, hey, they're like 5-year-olds. Jaehaerys is 5. Why can't they have a baby? And no, because they couldn't be asleep. You can't just have a baby there. Like, it has to be someone who can give a good performance. On top of that, there are legal limits on what you can do with a child. And he didn't go into too much detail, but one point he did relate was, for example, the brief shot of a gloved hand clasping over Jaehaerys' mouth, waking him up so he can't scream, and then they stab him off screen. That wasn't the blood actor's hand, that they legally had to use the boy's father. The child actor's father had to be the one doing that. So limitations for that it's always difficult, that he's, again, watch the Westeros.org thing. I think he explained it best of what you could have. He wasn't lying to us. He said, yes, you plausibly could have, but there were so many limitations on it, I felt it wouldn't really have been worth it. And I agree with his decision there, that you'd have to take out the part where he taunts him. Point 2, and I've already said this in my episode review, I kind of anticipated just how much TV-first audiences would be so horrified that they might stop watching in large numbers, that even the toned-down version that we got, I have had TV-first close relatives and family friends threatening to stop watching the show over it. Even when I'm pointing out, well, it happens off camera, it's not gratuitous, it was even worse in the book, they actually tried to downplay it. It's people who sat through, like, the Sansa rape and how much other gore on Game of Thrones. I mean, I knew they'd be upset. I just didn't think they'd threaten to quit the show over it. Particularly because I know it was even worse in the book. So, unfortunately, we're so used to dealing with Benioff and Weiss problems that there is a point where you do have to reasonably go, this would be so dark we can't actually show it on camera. I mean, think about, like, if they ever did a flashback to Robert's Rebellion, would you show Gregor Clegane actually bashing a baby's head in on camera? Or how John's half-sister, the younger one, that she was stabbed like 100 times because she wouldn't stop screaming. I mean, they mentioned that, but there's limits to what you should put on screen in some cases, simply because it's not serving the story, it's distracting, and of course from the out-of-universe reason for them as a TV business, like, agree with it or not, people would stop watching in large numbers if you made something a certain level of dark. And I understand that, and sympathize they are working within those restraints. So just that's from my real experience of in the past week encountering people who were really shaken by even the TV version. And I made it a point to watch I've watched like at least a dozen major review channels by TV first people. I like to check those out to see what was confusing to people, what did they like, what did they hate, that kind of thing. But getting deeper into this, point 3, even before they changed this, like, since the end of Season 1, I have been worried about them losing the interesting character TV Helaena, who is a lot more detailed and very different than book Helaena, who's kind of just a sketch. And Condal does broadly admit to this in the Westeros podcast, though using his own wording, and I agreed with him, but I had already come to this myself. This was a fear I had for a while, that in the book version, Helaena is so traumatized by they made her choose, then picked the other one just to be cruel. She is so traumatized that she goes catatonic. Literally catatonic. She never speaks again. She ceases to be a character. The text outright says she might as well have died that day. She was functionally dead. So I knew if they did that, we were losing this really interesting take on a character. And I've been thinking this since Season 1 ended, and I was confused when we got filming leaks a while back, like the stuff you see in Episode 2 of the funeral procession through the streets of Caceres, Spain. When they're in public like that, we get spy photos. We went, wow, the funeral carriage has both Alicent and Helaena doesn't look totally crazy in it. I mean, obviously she's mourning as much as Alicent is, but she doesn't look literally catatonic. This catatonic mess in full-on Ophelia mode, like in Hamlet. And we wondered, why is that, for like a year now? Well, it turns out it's because Blood and Cheese was toned down a little bit, just enough that she wouldn't be driven insane. That in her mind, in the new version, it's, focused on trying to save the daughter, versus pick which one lives and dies just because. I talked about this in the other video of, she understood that she took at face value. They said, point out the boy quickly because we're hurrying because guards are coming. Point out the boy, we don't have time to check them, or we'll kill all three of you really quickly, it'll be faster. I don't see how she could feel, the actress said this in the thing, she had no options, so she wouldn't go mad with guilt over it. It's just upsetting that she was, well, I saved the daughter. So while she's upset about it as much as Alicent is, Alicent didn't go crazy, she won't go crazy, and we didn't lose this really interesting character. Next, I want to point out, that, as others have said, this is not a case of we reconceived the role to make it worthy of the actor's talents, which is a phrase Benioff and Weiss actually used in the Season 5 Blu-ray, and that the media should have jumped on but didn't, that there is no in-universe character. There isn't a TV Ilaria Sand distinct from book Ilaria Sand. That in the commentary they said we rewrote Ilaria Sand purely to show off Indira Varma. There is no higher reason. And this ceased being a TV show. It was pandering actors chewing the scenery, and particularly the lead actors pandering them for rewards. And it's all linked, as I said, and the big part of that is that they'd show them all. You could even see the way they filmed the show changed. It was well, it was always like this, but increasingly tight close-ups with just emotive face on the lead actors. That's all it was. Well, if you sit down and think about it, that's really not what they did here at all. First off, you can see just the way they filmed it wasn't showing off a big lot of tight close-ups. There weren't that many close-ups. It was wide shot, not really playing off non-verbal reactions, because a lot of this is Helaena talking to them as she, I could give you my necklace, no, and that even when she sees what they're doing off camera, she just horrified goes, no, there is dialogue in this. And it's really not comparable the way the cinematography works. This isn't about the actor, this is about this interesting TV version of a character that they invented. That she's odd because she strongly inherited the Targaryen bloodline's tendency for prophetic dreams, and the actress said it's more like intuitions. It's not voluntary and it's not coherent, it just comes in flashes. It's more of a feeling. And she doesn't understand it herself. That Ryan Condal, again, directly addressed this in the podcast interview, and obviously his wording is different from mine, but he remarked on, well, we started developing Helaena, she was really interesting, we wanted to explore other things with the character and use it to work in the prophecy element of everything, and that's one of the few magic things they can really work in this era, which doesn't have a lot of other magic stuff. I talked about this in Season 1, that we can work in prophecy as a magic thing where there aren't, like, ice zombies. So just various things of the character was interesting, and we decided to go somewhere with it during the brainstorming phase of the early writing for the series as a whole, long before they had cast anyone. And my answer to those saying, oh, you've fallen for these performances, these faces, major point that they're not just showing off the actor. TV Helaena has already been played by multiple different actors because of the time jumps. In Season 1, we only had 2 episodes with young Helaena and 2 episodes with adult Helaena. And remember what it was like as Season 1 was coming out 1 week at a time, episode by episode. People already thought Helaena was a fascinating character, distinct from the books, that TV Helaena was fascinating before the final time jump where they switched to the adult actor. That even teenage Helaena was interesting to people. So it's not about the actor at all. And the direct comparison I'd make is to the similar choice in changing characters from book to TV show to change Rhaenyra and Alicent to be closer in age so they could be best friends in their youth, later turning into enemies. Well, think about that was a change from the books, which had nothing to do with the actors because the actors hadn't been cast yet, and moreover, involved roles which were infamously recasting the lead roles mid-season. So whether you like Rhaenyra and Alicent being best friends who turn on each other or not, you can't really say it was due to actor favoritism when it was something they planned long in advance in a role that gets recast over time. Pretty much the same thing for Helaena, that, well, we had this idea for where to go with the character. It's really not tied to showing off the actor and over-emoting and stuff. So I'm interested in where they take this. Obviously, her ultimate fate will be the same, just having her around and able to speak instead of being an Ophelia-like catatonic zombie. I think this was the right way to go, and in fact, leading up to Season 2, before we got those first spy photos, I was feeling bad about, this was an interesting idea for a character, and we're going to lose it so quickly. So on paper, I'm interested in this as a concept. Point 4, and it's really 3 reasons, maybe 4 reasons, because it's speculative. Condal did confirm his exact wording that he said, the younger boy, who's just like 2 years old, Maelor hasn't been born yet in the TV show. And that the phrasing he used was hasn't been born yet. He said that in the Entertainment Weekly interview. Then, thankfully, the Westeros.org podcast asked him directly, your exact words were not born yet, right? That he'll come eventually, and Condal simply said yes, then moved on. So it's not that he won't exist, it's that he's going to be born at some point, like Season 2, maybe Season 3. And given the route they already went with Blood and Cheese, I thought that was an interesting opportunity for other commentary and stories, because thinking on it, I mean, I'm making this before I've seen episode 2. Given that the Greens are all about that, well, our claim to rule is based on male inheritance, which is just they wanted power. Remember, there was a time when Otto was pushing for Rhaenyra over Daemon. It's all about who has power, not male inheritance. Suddenly, Aegon II doesn't have a male heir. So, I think the way they're going with this is that in the aftermath of Blood and Cheese, they're going to go, well, gotta get Helaena pregnant again to pump out another male baby. Whether she wants to or not, doesn't matter that she's mourning. And it will highlight that, to the Greens, defenders of the patriarchy, they're using her as a broodmare, and she has no, bodily autonomy, as they say. And on top of that, tying in with everything Alicent went through, and another thing was, as Red Team Review and Preston have said, that they kind of need to think of things for Alicent to do in the middle of the story, because the book, she doesn't that much. They could have her dealing with the guilt of, they are blatantly doing to my daughter what was done to me. That I was treated as a baby factory, and that's all she is to them. And the contrast with, I know it was supposed to be wishful thinking, I think the writers nailed it, but when she gives that whole speech to Rhaenys about, well, yeah, it's the patriarchy, but as a woman in it, I can still influence and steer things in the right direction. And you're seeing on the small council, no, your job was to be the baby factory, raise the son. The instant he's on the throne, mission accomplished, you're done. We don't really need you anymore. So her whole thing of, no, I can stay and influence things, it's, no, your role in this is pump out babies. And you will see that she has no place in the small council, and that they're not listening to her, and seeing what's happening to Helaena being forced to get pregnant again immediately, and feeling terrible about it, because we've never really seen Helaena and Alicent having a decent conversation before. Briefly when she says Jaehaerys is dead, but it's not really back and forth. So I thought that moving the birth of Maelor to being on camera, again, I would have devoted 2 seasons to season 1, and have them discussing, wow, you're making me get pregnant again, for Maelor, before Viserys dies, but that might actually be pretty interesting if they treat it that way, of commenting on the parallel with Alicent. But again, like Red Team Review, other people already made videos about this. It's not book fans versus TV fans. It's even split the book fans. Generally, I've seen people like Red Team Review and even Westeros.org, the hardcore book fans, understood okay, this is a choice you made, but we understand and respect it. That this is not comparable to the nonsense Benioff and Weiss put us through, where they go, oh, we reconceived the role to make it worthy of the actor's talents, or, dear God, when they actually said, creatively it made sense to us because we wanted it to happen. Consider that Condal has given 3 major interviews on this, one of them a podcast to the major book fan site. When season 5, Benioff and Weiss did the invented Sansa rape, they just refused to talk about it in interviews. You knew they tell people in advance, don't even bring it up. And that whole thing, it became a meme among the book fandom that a week after that episode, it was something about his canned interviews with James Hibberd. Benioff said, oh, I know some people are upset that we sped up Tyrion's storyline slightly, so he meets Daenerys now when he hasn't quite met her at the end of book 5 yet, but he's going to. But, creatively it made sense to us because we wanted it to happen. This is literally within days. It was a week later, after the Sansa rape, and he's addressing... And I can never tell, is he truly so oblivious that he really believed that? Or was that... Am I reading in that was him doing this screw you to people who said, why are you changing Sansa? And he referred to, obliquely by talking about Tyrion? To this day, I don't know, and I really think he was just that oblivious. But that... oh, creatively it made sense to us because we wanted it to happen. That is a direct precursor to Dany kind of forgot about the Iron Fleet. What insults me the most isn't that he said these things, but at that point in time, with that amount of hype, the media gave him a free pass and never scrutinized these absurd things he was saying in public interviews. That No one ever called out. There was never like an article in Variety or Vanity Fair going, there's this giant invented rape controversy and it's been 12 months and they have never addressed it in an interview. That is deeply unprofessional. That they have never talked about why they did that. Or later they go, I already talked about that. You didn't. That is so people giving guff to Condal about, he gave very detailed answers at least 3 interviews the week that it aired. He's going to end up talking about this a lot, probably. And the fact that he gave a direct podcast interview with Westeros.org, the book fan site, and gave a detailed response. This is nothing like what Benioff and Weiss were doing. And I said that, okay, you changed it. I feel it's internally consistent. It lacks a bit of the impact of the book version. On a certain level, I didn't want the book version because it's a little too impactful for my taste, and because it would waste Helaena, this interesting character. So I think just people wanted to see histrionics and gore, and hype this up. The hype people who aren't. There are people who are fans, and then there's the clickbaiters just wanted another Red Wedding moment. And when they toned it down a bit, what the hell are they going to talk about now? And their time is already passing because the chatbot channels, the ChatGPT-driven AI channels, are going to outcompete the humans trying to make clickbait. That time is past. That you were replaceable. So these are the out-of-universe reasons. I'm not even addressing in-universe stuff of why they chose to do this. This was planned out long in advance. There's things you can't do with child actors. A couple of other factors might have driven people away from the show. So check out you can quickly read through the text interviews. The 3 links below. The podcast is half an hour. It is well worth your time. He talks about, it's very succinct. Every sentence is focused on an important topic, like input on the title sequence by George R. R. Martin, or when will we end the show? And he points out, like, he's not going to stay around to, like, do the next historical era, like Blackfire Rebellion. So this story ends, then the next story begins, which makes sense. It's fine. But a lot of that was about blood and cheese. And he was very dealt with us honestly and sincerely. And this was a reasonable change.